The dawn of dreams. Sarah Martinez pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the Grand Meridian Hotel, her worn sneakers making barely a whisper against the polished floors. At 28, she had been invisible to the wealthy guests. For 3 years, moving through their world like a ghost in a gray uniform. The hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and gold-trimmed mirrors. But Sarah saw beyond the glamour to the business underneath. Every morning at 5, she arrived before. The sun painted the sky pink. While others slept in luxury suites, Sarah studied. Her small apartment table was covered with business books borrowed from the library, financial magazines found in guest rooms, and notebooks filled with her observations. She watched everything. Which rooms stayed empty, which services guests complained about, where money was wasted on unnecessary extras. The guests walked past her as if she were furniture. Some dropped towels on the floor while staring directly at her, expecting her to pick them up without a word. Others spoke about million-dollar deals over breakfast, never noticing the young woman refilling their coffee cups was memorizing every detail. Sarah's heart burned with ambition, but her face remained calm and professional. During her lunch breaks, she sat in the hotel's garden, sketching ideas for improvements. She imagined turning the unused rooftop into a garden restaurant, creating a spa in the basement space that stored old furniture, and offering personalized services that would make guests feel truly special. These weren't just dreams written in a notebook. They were carefully calculated business plans with projected costs and profits. The hotel manager, Mr. Thompson, barely acknowledged her existence. When he did speak to her, it was to complain about something trivial or to remind her that maids were easily replaceable. Sarah nodded respectfully, but inside she was learning from his mistakes. She watched him waste money on flashy renovations while ignoring the small details that actually mattered to guests. One evening, while cleaning the penthouse suite, Sarah overheard a conversation that would change everything. 2 businessmen were discussing the Grand Meridian's financial troubles. The hotel was bleeding money, and the owners were desperate to sell. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she dusted the table, but her mind was racing with possibilities. That night, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by 3 years of research and planning. She pulled out a calculator and began adding up her savings. Every dollar she had saved from her modest salary, every tip she had carefully set aside, every penny from her weekend job at a local diner. It wasn't much by rich people's standards, but it was her entire world. The reflection in her apartment window showed a tired young woman in a faded t-shirt. But Sarah saw something else. A future hotel owner who understood both the business and the heart of hospitality. She had been invisible for so long that nobody suspected the fire burning inside her. Tomorrow, she would begin the most dangerous gamble of her life. Calculating the impossible, Sarah's research intensified as autumn painted the city in golden hues. She arrived at work even earlier, staying even later, mapping every corner of the Grand Meridian's operations. While other employees gossiped during breaks, Sarah counted empty rooms, tracked guest preferences, and identified exactly why the hotel was failing. The problem wasn't the location or the building itself. The Grand Meridian sat in the heart of the business district, with breathtaking city views and elegant architecture. The problem was management that didn't understand their customers. Sarah had served coffee to hundreds of business travelers who complained about the same things: slow internet, poor breakfast options, and a cold, unwelcoming atmosphere. Despite the luxury surroundings. During quiet moments, Sarah befriended Elena, the night auditor, who had worked at the hotel for 15 years. Elena was the only person who treated Sarah like a human being, and slowly, Sarah began sharing her observations. Elena's eyes widened as Sarah described her ideas for transforming the hotel's profitability. "You see things differently than Neil. Managers upstairs. Elena whispered during a midnight conversation. But Sarah, buying a hotel requires millions of dollars. How could someone like us ever ... Sarah smiled mysteriously. She had been thinking about that problem for months. Traditional bank loans were impossible without collateral or connections. But Sarah had discovered something else. The Grand Meridian's owners were so desperate to sell that they might consider alternative arrangements, especially if someone could prove they understood the business better than the current management. Plan was audacious. Sarah would approach the owners with a detailed business proposal, showing exactly how to turn the hotel profitable, then negotiate a unique purchase agreement. She would offer a smaller down payment in exchange for a larger percentage of future profits, essentially buying the hotel with its own success. Every evening after work, Sarah refined her presentation. She created charts showing seasonal occupancy patterns, identified underutilized spaces that could generate additional revenue, and outlined a staff training program that would transform guest experiences. Her proposal wasn't just about buying a hotel. It was about reimagining what hospitality could be. The most challenging part was financing the down payment. Sarah had saved $37,000 over 3 years, but she needed more. She swallowed her pride and approached her uncle Roberto, who owned a small construction company. Roberto had always believed in Sarah's intelligence, even when others in the family thought she was wasting her potential cleaning hotel rooms. "You want to buy the Grand Meridian?" Roberto's weathered hands held Sarah's business plan. "Mia, this is either the craziest idea I've ever heard or the most brilliant." As Roberto read through Sarah's research, his expression changed from skepticism to amazement. Sarah hadn't just dreamed about owning a hotel. She had created a comprehensive strategy for success. Her uncle agreed to loan her an additional $50,000, secured against his own business. The final piece of Sarah's plan involved something the current owners desperately needed: a buyer who could take over immediately without lengthy negotiations or complicated financing arrangements. Sarah would offer to maintain all current employees and continue operations without interruption, something larger corporate buyers couldn't guarantee. Sarah scheduled a meeting with the ownership group for the following week. As she pressed her one good business suit, purchased from a thrift store, she felt the weight of her dreams and fears. In 7 days, she would walk into a boardroom filled with wealthy investors and propose that a hotel maid should become their successor. The audacity of it terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Walking into the Lion's Den, the morning of the meeting arrived with crisp November air and Sarah's heart pounding like thunder. She had requested a personal day, telling Mr. Thompson she had a family emergency. In a way, it was true. This meeting would determine her family's future for generations. Sarah, dressed carefully in her navy blue suit, the only professional outfit she owned. Her reflection looked different somehow, not like a maid, but like a businesswoman with a vision. She carried a leather portfolio borrowed from Elena, containing months of research, financial projections, and dreams transformed into concrete plans. The ownership group met in the hotel's executive conference room, a space Sarah had cleaned hundreds of times, but never entered as anything other than invisible help. 5 men in expensive suits sat around a mahogany table, looking skeptical as Sarah was introduced as a potential buyer. "Ms. Martinez," said Richard Whitfield, the lead investor, "we understand you work here as housekeeping staff." His tone suggested this meeting was a waste of his time. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she opened her portfolio, but her voice was steady. "Gentlemen, I've spent 3 years studying this hotel's operations from the inside. I know why it's failing, and I know exactly how to fix it." The room fell silent as Sarah began her presentation. She didn't apologize for her background or make excuses for her modest appearance. Instead, she spoke with the confidence of someone who had done her homework better than anyone in the room. She revealed shocking insights about guest satisfaction, showing how simple changes could increase occupancy rates by 30%. She detailed wasteful spending the management had overlooked and identified revenue opportunities worth hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. The men who had seemed bored began leaning forward, asking detailed questions. "These are impressive observations," admitted Charles Morrison, the hotel's original developer. "But Ms. Martinez, purchasing the Grand Meridian requires $12 million. Even with owner financing, you would need substantial capital." Sarah had prepared for this moment. She outlined her unconventional financing proposal, a modest down payment of $200,000, with the remainder paid through a percentage of increased profits over 10 years. She would personally guarantee specific performance metrics, with severe penalties if she failed to meet them. "You're asking us to bet $12 million on a maid," said investor James Crawford bluntly. "No," Sarah replied calmly. "You're betting on someone who knows this business better than the managers who ran it into the ground. I'm asking you to bet on results, not titles." The room erupted in discussion. Some investors seemed intrigued by Sarah's detailed knowledge and innovative financing structure. Others worried about the unprecedented nature of the deal. Sarah waited patiently, knowing she had presented her best case. After 2 hours of debate, Richard Whitfield addressed her directly. "Ms. Martinez, your proposal is unique. We need time to consider this carefully. However, I will say that your understanding of our challenges is more thorough than any previous buyers." Sarah gathered her materials with steady hands, though. Inside she felt like she might collapse. "Gentlemen, I'll be working my regular shift tomorrow if you need to reach me. You'll find me in room 1247, probably replacing towels." As she walked through the hotel lobby, Sarah caught her reflection in the mirrors that had reflected her invisible presence for 3 years. Today, she looked different. Today, she looked like someone who had just changed her entire life, regardless of the final answer. That evening, Elena found Sarah in the employee break room, staring at her phone. "How did it go?" Sarah smiled with exhaustion and exhilaration. "I think I may have just convinced 5 millionaires to sell their hotel to their maid." Dreams becoming reality. 3 days passed like 3 years. Sarah worked her regular shifts, cleaning rooms and serving guests, while her phone remained stubbornly silent. She had begun to convince herself that the meeting was a beautiful dream when Elena burst into the supply closet where Sarah was restocking towels. "Sarah, Mr. Whitfield is in the lobby asking for you." Sarah's heart stopped. She smoothed her gray uniform and walked to the marble lobby where Richard Whitfield stood in his perfectly tailored coat. Around them, guests and staff moved through their morning routines, completely unaware that history was being made. "Miss Martinez." Whitfield's expression was unreadable. "After considerable discussion, the ownership group has reached a decision." Sarah felt the world spinning around her. This was it. Either her dreams would come true or crash spectacularly. She thought of her uncle Roberto, who had risked his own business to believe in her vision. She thought of her parents, who had sacrificed everything so she could have opportunities in America. "We accept your proposal," Whitfield continued, "with some modifications to the payment structure. Congratulations, Ms. Martinez. You're about to become the owner of the Grand Meridian Hotel." The lobby seemed to freeze. Sarah felt tears threatening to spill, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. When can we begin the transition?" "Our lawyers will have contracts ready by Friday. You can take possession the following Monday." Whitfield smiled for the first time since she'd met him. "I have to admit, Ms. Martinez, in 40 years of business, I've never seen anyone understand a company's operations like you do. We're betting you'll prove that insight matters more than pedigree." That afternoon, Sarah walked through the Grand Meridian with different eyes. Every room, every corner, every detail was now her responsibility and her opportunity. She thought about her first changes: training staff to remember guest names, upgrading the breakfast offerings, and creating the rooftop garden restaurant she had sketched so many times. The hardest part was telling her coworkers. Most were shocked into silence when Sarah gathered the housekeeping staff after their shift. Maria, who had worked alongside Sarah for 2 years, stared in disbelief. "You're going to be our boss?" Maria whispered. "I'm going to be your partner," Sarah corrected. "You all know this hotel better than anyone. I'll need your help to make it successful." Elena cried when Sarah shared the news privately. "I always knew you were special. But this, Sarah, you're living proof that dreams can come true." Sarah's family reacted with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. Her mother called crying, switching between English and Spanish as she tried to process that her daughter, who had cleaned hotel rooms, was now a hotel owner. Uncle Roberto's reaction was the most meaningful. When Sarah called to tell him the news, he was quiet for a long moment. "Mia, I loaned you money because I believed in your intelligence. But you've done something I never imagined possible. You've changed what's possible for our entire family." That weekend, Sarah walked through her small apartment, looking at the business books and notebooks that had sustained her dreams for 3 years. On Monday, she would walk into the Grand Meridian not as a maid, but as an owner. She would implement the strategies she had developed while being invisible, proving that the most powerful insights often come from those society overlooks. As she prepared for bed Sunday night, Sarah reflected on the journey from invisible maid to hotel owner. The most incredible part wasn't that she had bought a hotel. It was that she had done it by being exactly who she was, seeing exactly what others had missed, and refusing to accept that her background determined her future. From invisible to unstoppable, Monday morning arrived like sunrise after the longest night of Sarah's life. She dressed in a new business suit, her first purchase as a successful entrepreneur, and walked through the employee entrance of the Grand Meridian for the last time. Tomorrow, she would enter through the main lobby as the owner. The transition. Meeting with the management team was surreal. Mr. Thompson, who had barely acknowledged her existence for 3 years, now sat nervously across from her in the conference room. The other department heads struggled to make eye contact with the woman they had seen emptying trash cans just days before. "I know this situation is unusual," Sarah began, her voice calm and professional. "But I want you to know that my goal is making this hotel successful for everyone, guests, employees, and investors. I hope you'll give me a chance to prove that change can be positive." Sarah's first week as owner was a masterclass in applied psychology and business strategy. She didn't fire anyone or make dramatic announcements. Instead, she implemented small changes that had massive impacts. Guest satisfaction scores, which had been declining for 2 years, began improving almost immediately. The breakfast menu was redesigned based on Sarah's observations of what guests actually wanted. The internet infrastructure was upgraded after Sarah showed the board how many business travelers had complained about connectivity. Most importantly, she instituted a guest recognition program where staff were trained and incentivized to remember returning customers' preferences. "Good morning, Mr. Patterson," Sarah heard the front desk clerk say to a regular business traveler. "Your usual suite with extra pillows is ready, and we have your preferred newspaper waiting." Mr. Patterson looked stunned. "How did you remember all that?" These small touches created a buzz among the hotel's corporate clientele. Business travelers began specifically requesting the Grand Meridian because they felt valued rather than just processed. Within 6 weeks, occupancy rates had increased by 20%. The most emotional moment came when Sarah implemented her profit-sharing program for all employees. During the staff meeting, She explained that everyone's hard work had contributed to the hotel's turnaround, and everyone deserved to benefit from its success. Maria, the housekeeper who had worked alongside Sarah, raised her hand tentatively. "Ms. Martinez, does this mean we'll get bonuses if the hotel does well?" "It means you're all part of this hotel's success story," Sarah replied. "When we succeed, we all succeed." A financial transformation was even more dramatic than the cultural changes. By the end of her third month, the Grand Meridian was generating 40% more revenue per room than under the previous management. Sarah's unconventional purchase agreement meant that these increased profits were rapidly paying down her loan balance. Local business magazines began calling for interviews, wanting to understand how a former maid had engineered such a remarkable turnaround. Sarah used these opportunities to highlight her employees and share credit for the hotel's success. But her story was inspiring entrepreneurs across the city. The most satisfying moment came when Richard Whitfield visited for a quarterly review. Walking through the bustling lobby, observing the happy guests and confident staff, he shook his head in amazement. "Sarah, I've been in hospitality for 30 years, and I've never seen a transformation like this. You've increased our property value by millions of dollars while creating exactly the kind of workplace culture we always hoped for but never achieved." That evening, Sarah stood in the rooftop garden she had designed, now under construction and scheduled to open in the spring. The city sparkled below her like stars fallen to earth. She thought about the girl who had arrived in America with her parents, speaking broken English and carrying enormous dreams. The phone in her pocket buzzed with a text from Elena. "Boss, we just got another 5-star review praising how the staff makes guests feel like family. You're not just running a hotel. You're showing the world what happens when someone with a servant's heart gets the power to serve at the highest level." Sarah smiled. Watching the sun set over the city, she now influenced as a successful business owner, rather than someone invisible in its margins. The millionaire, who never forgot 2 years after purchasing the Grand Meridian, Sarah Martinez stood before a packed auditorium at the local business college, invited to share her story with the next generation of entrepreneurs. The young woman who had once been invisible was now recognized as one of the city's most innovative business leaders. "Success isn't about where you start," she told the audience of eager students. "It's about how carefully you observe, how persistently you prepare, and how courageously you act when opportunity meets preparation." The Grand Meridian had become the most profitable hotel in the business district. Sarah had opened the rooftop garden restaurant, which was now booked months in advance. The basement spa she had envisioned was generating additional revenue streams. Most importantly, employee turnover had dropped to nearly zero as staff members became invested partners in the hotel's continued success. Sarah's personal transformation was equally remarkable. Her net worth had exceeded $2 million, making her one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the city. She had purchased a beautiful home, helped her parents buy their first house, and paid off Uncle Roberto's construction loan early with a generous bonus for believing in her dreams. But success hadn't changed Sarah's character. Every morning, she still walked through the hotel, greeting employees by name and occasionally helping with tasks when needed. She never forgot that her insights came from understanding the business at its most fundamental level. The most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The International Hospitality Association awarded Sarah their Visionary Leadership Honor, recognizing her innovative approach to employee empowerment and guest satisfaction. Standing at the podium in New York City, accepting the award from industry leaders who had once ignored her existence, Sarah felt the weight of her journey. "This award doesn't belong to me alone," she said during her acceptance speech. "It belongs to every person who has been overlooked, underestimated, or told their dreams were too big for their circumstances. It belongs to everyone who proves that greatness isn't inherited. It's earned through vision, hard work, and the courage to bet on yourself. Back at the Grand Meridian, Sarah had created a scholarship program for employees' children, recognizing that education was the foundation of opportunity. She also established a mentorship network, connecting her staff with successful professionals in various fields. Elena, now promoted to assistant general manager, often reflected on Sarah's remarkable journey. "I watched you study and dream for 3 years," she told Sarah during a quiet moment in the garden restaurant. "But even I never imagined it would lead to this." Sarah looked out over the city where she had once felt invisible. "The most important thing I learned is that everyone has valuable insights. We just need to create environments where those insights can be heard and acted upon." The hotel industry had taken notice of Sarah's methods. She was regularly invited to consult with struggling properties, helping them implement the observation-based management strategies that had transformed the Grand Meridian. Several major hotel chains had offered to purchase her business for amounts that would make her generationally wealthy. But Sarah wasn't interested in selling. She had found her calling in creating spaces where both employees and guests could thrive. Her vision extended beyond the Grand Meridian to a small chain of boutique hotels, each one designed around the principle that hospitality is ultimately about seeing and valuing every person. On quiet evenings, Sarah sometimes walked through the hotel's marble hallways, remembering the young woman who had pushed a cleaning cart down these same corridors while dreaming of impossible things. The mirrors that had once reflected her invisibility now reflected a confident leader whose story proved that the most powerful transformations often begin with someone others choose not to see. Sarah Martinez had become living proof that in America, with enough vision, preparation, and courage, a maid could indeed become a millionaire, and in the process, redefine what leadership looks like in the modern world. This story demonstrates that success belongs to those who combine careful observation with bold action, regardless of their starting position in life.